Very interesting gospel reading today to reflect upon, and I would like to reflect with you upon some of the words that precede and proceed the gospel reading in order to frame it contextually. One of the verses that immediately follows the gospel reading is when the Jews who have disputed amongst themselves suddenly cry out, "This is a hard word, this is a hard teaching, who can accept this teaching?" And that occurs in verse 60 of John's Gospel. It's a very interesting phrase. The word they use, hard, in Latin is durus. And possible meanings of this word durus is difficult, harsh, austere, unfeeling, like iron. In this reading from St. John's Gospel, we hear the reassuring words of Jesus, his bread of life discourses, words that are, of course, meant to challenge us, but also to offer comfort and reassurance. And like all promises that are both challenging and reassuring, the people react in very predictable ways. This word is hard. It is difficult. It is harsh. This is an austere teaching. It's unfeeling. It's like iron. Who could possibly listen to it? And they dispute amongst themselves. Why this reaction? It reminds me of a famous Johnny Cash song, "The Wanderer." I stopped outside a church house where the citizens like to sit. They say they want the kingdom, but they don't want God in it. You might say that Johnny Cash's song is an example of durus, a difficult, harsh, austere, unfeeling teaching like iron. It cuts to the bone and reveals the darker subconscious of the people. They say they want the kingdom, but they don't want God in it. Jesus' free gift to the people is, in fact, the free gift of the kingdom. Eternal and lasting friendship with God. In the verses leading up to today's reading, Jesus reinforces the fact that it was not Moses who sent the bread from heaven when the Israelites were starving in the desert. It was not Moses who sent the manna from on high. It was God, the same God who freed them from their slavery in Egypt and who led them as a pillar of cloud by day and as a pillar of fire by night. It was God who divided the Red Sea. It was God whose hand drove back Pharaoh's chariots. It was God whose death angel passed over the houses of the Hebrew slaves. It is God's whose presence fills the Holy of Holies. God's voice who breaks the cedars of Lebanon and makes the oak trees writhe. And in the courts of the house of our God, they cry, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord, the God of hosts." Jesus is revealing to the people the will of this God. I don't call you slaves, I call you friends. Listen to the number of times Jesus speaks about the will of God, even in the verses that lead up to the proclamation of today's reading. All of them taken from chapter 6 of St. John's Gospel. Listen to verses 37 through 38. All whom the Father gives me will come to me, and the one who comes to me I will most certainly not cast out. I have descended from heaven, so that I might do not my will, but the will of the one who sent me. Here again, verse 39 from St. John's Gospel. This is the will of the one who sent me, that I shall lose nothing of all that he has given me, but instead shall raise it up on the last day. A theme proclaimed time and time again in the gradual hymn that we just sang. If you're not convinced about the will of God, listen to verse 40 of St. John's Gospel, chapter 6. This is the will of my Father, that everyone who sees the Son and has faith in him might have life, and I shall raise him up on the last day. So, what is the will of God? That nothing, no thing, and no one be lost to eternal destruction. It is the will of God that everything and everyone be raised up on the last day. So it is God's will to give to his people the gift of everlasting friendship, a new covenant, a new offer of relationship sealed in flesh and in blood. Now, how are the people going to respond to this promise? Or maybe the question, how would I respond to this promise? Jesus, sent by God as the anointed, God in the flesh and in the blood, Corpus Christi, the one who is able in his own body to ratify God's promise, the true bread from heaven, imperishable bread, bread that will nourish both the body and the soul. This is good news, very good news indeed. And at first, the people do respond eagerly. They want to receive this bread. They want to receive this food, nourishment that will heal them and restore them and animate their bodies and their souls, a food and a nourishment that the Son of God will give you. And so the people respond emphatically, give us this bread. Give us this bread always. But now the disappointment. When Jesus responds to the enthusiasm, I am the living bread that has descended out of heaven. And the people go bananas. They begin disputing amongst themselves and shouting and arguing back and forth. Isn't this Joseph's son? Didn't he grow up on the other side of town? Who does he think he is anyways? So what has happened? What has happened here? It's kind of like having spiritual whiplash. One moment, the people are ecstatic. They're begging Jesus, "Sir, give us this bread always." The next moment, they're incredulous. This is a hard teaching. Who can accept it? Such a quick turnaround. Anticipation turns to disgust. Open hearts freeze into hardened hearts. The joy of give us becomes the lament of duress. This is difficult. It's harsh. It's austere. It's unfeeling. It's like iron. They dispute amongst themselves. They argue back and forth. It's a Johnny Cash moment, wouldn't you say? It's a very human moment. I stopped outside a church house where the citizens like to sit. They say they want the kingdom, but they don't want God in it. Søren Kierkegaard, the Danish philosopher theologian, calls this taking offense at God. The people take offense at God. Have you noticed that people don't have a problem with the deistic idea of a God who is mighty and personal, a God who is powerful? In fact, it's pretty easy to dismiss that sort of a God. Nobody seems at all offended by a God who's too powerful and too almighty to care. I mean, why would I care about a God who doesn't care about me? But what offends people is the God of Christianity, a God who comes among us. And we're reminded of this today as we celebrate the feast of Corpus Christi, a God who comes among us as a friend in the flesh and in the blood, a God who suffers like one of us, lives like one of us, experiences life like one of us, a God who sympathizes like one of us, a God who journeys like one of us. And from that point of view, as a friend, I no longer call you slaves, I call you friends. From the bottom of the human barrel, from the depths of hell, this God lifts all of that up again in a sacrifice of praise and thanksgiving. I will raise it up on the last day. Well, that's a cause for offense. Because if the God of Jesus is the living God, the true God, then it places a demand on my life. It places a demand on my soul. And that is the cause for offense. I cannot accept Jesus as Lord and then go about living my life as though I deny his presence in the world. I cannot accept Jesus and then deny that he desires to draw all things to him. All things, all of this stuff, all the stuff in me. There's a lot of stuff these days in me. I've got to do a little bit of work on that. But all of this stuff in me, all of the stuff around me, the unseen and the seen, the earth and the rocks, dogs, cats, birds, maybe not cats, but birds, stars, planets, and space, but also the pain, the suffering, the injustice, the joy, the love, the flourishing. It's the stuff, it's the all that makes up the all that Jesus speaks of when he proclaims, I shall lose nothing of all that the Father has given me, but I will raise it up. It's so much easier to believe in a God who is too mighty, too powerful, too big to care. Why? Why is that preferable? Because Such a God demands nothing from me, and I'm justified in dismissing such a God. And maybe this is the God, maybe this is the bread that the people wanted Jesus to give them. Just the idea of a God. Just the idea of a God that has no demands on one's life or one's soul. Because that's an easy and desirable God to believe in. But instead, Jesus offends. He offers them the God who is offering them friendship. Jesus reveals that the offer of friendship requires nothing more than an acceptance of that friendship in return. But this is a very, very hard teaching. Who can accept it?